Hi, my name is Kerry Petty. I'm a Pilates instructor, dressage rider, and a USEF dressage judge. At the time of sheltering, I'm working on a series for you guys on relating Pilates to horseback riding, specifically dressage. When I first started it, I struggled with trying to figure out, especially some of the classic exercises, of how they actually related or how they could take them to the horse. So that's going to be my focus on this series of videos. I'm working through the principles right now. So the first one was on the pelvis placement. So if we kind of look at this apron here, if George will let us, working on the pelvis, being in a balanced position with the sit bones straight up and down. Okay, so kind of finding that pelvis and keeping it level as we're working. Finding the deep abdominal muscles, so your transverse muscle or your major core muscle fills up this area between the pelvis and the lowest rib all the way up to the sternum. So you can kind of see how that low back is in a vulnerable position. So the job of this core muscle that's going to help to keep your torso still in the saddle within the body is help to stabilize the low back. The next video that we worked on was about the rib cage, about allowing the inhaling and exhaling as we learn how to breathe correctly to feel those ribs expand to the side and into the back. Then we looked at ribcage placement. A lot of people have a tendency to flare those ribs forward. What that does is it changes the weight that's on the sit bones. It lightens the sit bones, all that the horse hates. He wants you to stay level as you're working. All right, so the next thing that we're going to work on is shoulder stabilization. So the top of the shoulder blades are here. The shoulder girdle basically is what we're thinking about. And so we're trying to stabilize the shoulders so the weight doesn't constantly go up in us. So that's our focus today, is on shoulder stabilization. So what it doesn't mean is, well, what it helps you do is to keep the weight down. But what we don't want to tell people, and I am guilty of this too, is to put your shoulders down. Because when people just put their shoulders down, they usually start from here and they pull them straight down. Well, when you do that, you kind of trap yourself and you create tension. What we want to do is to stabilize the shoulder blades in the back against the rib cage so they're flush with each other. So that means that the shoulder blades aren't pinched, and that is riders that have a tendency to flare through their ribs. And the shoulder blades aren't too far apart from each other. Those are people that have a tendency to round through their shoulders and sit behind the vertical. So we're trying to keep the shoulder blades against the rib cage. Now, we're super flexible in this area, not so much in the pelvis, so we can make lots of problems here. So on purpose, elevate your shoulders and notice how that feels, because you can only correct it if you know what you're doing wrong. This is George. All right, so you could think of, you want to have a nice distance from the top of the shoulder to the ear, so that's the distance that you want to be in. Notice if it goes higher, that you feel your weight shoot up. Again, it changes what your seat says to the horse. You kind of roll your shoulders in, you get in a little bit of a protected position. It makes breathing harder. Okay. And then come back to a normal position. Now, again, we don't want to do the opposite of that, which is just to pull the shoulders down, but do it on purpose. That puts tension in my back, restriction. Almost makes me want to arch my back a little bit too. And then try to come back to more of a neutral position. The other thing, again, like I said, that we don't want to do is what we would call protract the arm. So we're going to do that on purpose. So we're doing it seated first. George thinks I have something in my hands. All right, so that would be rounding. Notice that my shoulders lift when I do that, and I shorten the front of the body. Come back to neutral. Pinch the shoulder blades together. That hurts at the base of the shoulders and the neck, but I also can feel myself popping out through here. Come back to neutral. So no protraction. You got to be wide across the front of the chest. No retraction. You got to be wide across the back, and then come back to a neutral position. A lot of times it's good to do this on the mat. because you get feedback. And that's why a lot of the exercises in Pilates are done on your back first. So we're going to do some of those exercises. We're just going to lie down on our back. You can join me. Knees are bent, feet are hip distance apart. Okay, so I'm going to go through the basics that we've already learned. I have my clock face on the pelvis so that my pelvis is balanced. 12 o'clock is the belly button. Top of the pubic bone is 6 o'clock. Left hip bone is 3 o'clock. Right hip bone is 9 o'clock. When all four numbers on the same level plane, I'm in a normal curve of the spine, so that low back curve is slightly defined. And then from my ribs upward, I'm on the mat. Okay. When I'm going to tighten my deep abdominal muscles to try to get that deepest layer, the transverse muscle that runs horizontal, a weightlifter's belt was made to mimic this muscle. I pull up on the pelvic floor like doing a Kegel exercise, and then tighten my deep abdominal muscles. So now the weight is low here. I have tone and tension here, bouncing a quarter off your belly area you could think of. Okay. My rib cage is, like I said, down on the mat, so it's not arched. Now I want to think about my shoulder blades, and I want to kind of feel what they do. Okay. So if I round upward in that protraction, I feel my shoulder blades slide almost too far out to the side, and the edge of my shoulder blade is out of position because it's too far away from the spine and it's off the mat. So I come back to neutral. Pinching my shoulder blades together makes me arch my back, come back to neutral. Rounded shouldered, come back to neutral. You want to feel neutral as really a strong feeling in your home base. But notice what you like to do. Does it feel oh so good to arch your back? Or that feels like home base? We want to try to find a new home base. So be careful when you do this exercise that you don't overdo what you like to do, and don't go the other direction, because going the other direction is going to get you closer to neutral. Good. With your arms down by your side, again, elevating the shoulders we don't want to do. And now I'm going to bring them back to neutral. Depression I don't want to do, creates a lot of tension in the neck. Come back to neutral. Again, one more time, elevate, come back to neutral, depress, come back to neutral. So what I say that we want to have the shoulder blades where they should be, but how do we keep them there? That comes from stabilization of some shoulder muscles. One is going to be the lat muscle, the latissimus dorsi muscle. Two is going to be a balance between the rhomboids that are closest to the spine. If you think about doing a row, you're getting into your rhomboids. And the serratus muscle that pulls the edges of the shoulder blades against the rib cage, so a balance of those. So you've probably heard of your lat muscle as a lat pull down. I'm going to get my magic circle real quick. So the latissimus dorsi muscle is a muscle that runs across the back. It's huge. It starts at the arm bone, and a nickname for it is a swimmer's muscle. So if you think about a professional swimmer who is doing the breaststroke or the butterfly, and they have that huge back at the top of the shoulders and then a little tiny narrow waist, that's what the lat muscle looks like. So their shoulders looks broader because they built the lat muscle that starts here, and then it feeds into the back, and then it feeds all the way down to the sacrum. So one way to get that is to mimic that you are pushing your arm down against water resistance. So don't just bring it down, mimic that resistance, and then place your hand underneath your arm toward the back, and see as if you press down, if you can feel that muscle kind of pop out underneath your fingertips. So here my lat muscle isn't engaged, and here it is engaged. So you can kind of see it pop out. I feel wider across the chest area when I do this. Okay. Pilates uses a magic circle a lot. You may not have one. You can have a ball also. So there's two ways to do an exercise to get that feeling of the lats. The lats will help to keep the shoulder blades against your rib cage so that you will get a warning if you start to elevate your shoulders if you have your lats engaged. So I press in lightly on the magic circle and try to get those lats engaged underneath the armpit. Release the tension. Again, exhale to press in, and inhale, release the tension. Notice I'm not pressing in and elevating my shoulders. I'm feeling a strong across the bra strap area and lower down toward the pelvis. Some people feel it better when they pull out because the lat does pop out to the side. So that's another way that you can think about doing it. And release. Gives you a solid back, so again, your weight stays where it should be, not up into your shoulders. If maybe you just have a ball at home, you could also use your hands. You could take a ball, and again, it's just an isometric contraction. You're not trying to kill it, but you're trying to feel. And so that's why I really like the exercise where you're pressing down against a resistant. You lightly place your hand there so that you can feel it. Right, so that is shoulder stabilization. People have a tendency to pinch their shoulders together. In fact, models are taught to do that. That pulls your shoulder blades off your back. Your shoulder blades are supposed to be against your rib cage. That rounded position, it pulls the shoulder blades too far away from the spine. So we have to find a balance in the middle. So to feel those two muscles that balance, on purpose, we're going to pull back like we're rowing. And so you've probably been on a rowing machine before. See if you can feel the muscle. It's on, it attaches to the spine and it pulls the shoulder blades closer to the spine. Now most people have heard of that muscle and most people don't need to strengthen it. But the muscle that they haven't heard of is that the rhomboid attaches to the shoulder blade closest to the spine. And then this muscle on the side attaches to the outside of the shoulder blade here, and then it feeds around to the front of the body. So it pulls the edge of the shoulder blade, which sometimes we call winging. It pops up in the air. So this pulls it against your rib cage. So this will look silly, but that's okay. So it's called the superhero muscle too. So if you think about somebody posing and like they kind of bring their arms together here, that serratus muscle looks like a serrated blade and it kind of pops out here. So the Incredible Hulk, when he would do here, he would pop out the serratus muscle here. So it's that feeling that as you're pulling around here that you kind of feel a pulling sensation from the back and it attaches to each rib here. Hulk Hogan, my little brother was a big wrestling fanatic, so Hulk Hogan, when he does it here, you can feel that serratus muscle. Again, what it's helping you to do is to keep your shoulder blade against your rib cage. Again, we're working for the stability. We've got the pelvis with the deep abs. We've got the rib cage sitting over the pelvis. Now we want to have the shoulder blades sitting on the rib cage. All right, we're almost there. We only have one more principle to work on, and that's going to be your head and neck position. So I hope you join me for that also. Thank you.